The deeper Peter went into the water, the more real everything around him became. The spray of the sea hit his face. The wind pushed against his body. The darkness seemed to grow heavier with every step. And then it happened. He looked away. Just for a second. But that second changed everything. He saw the size of the waves. He felt the cold water under his feet, and suddenly, doubt crept in. The same man who just moments ago was walking on water now began to sink. The storm hadn't changed, Jesus hadn't moved, but Peter's focus had, and in that single moment of fear, he lost the miracle. As he sank, Peter cried out, "Lord, save me!" His voice wasn't calm or confident. It was desperate, real, human. Because in that moment, faith turned into fear, and fear turned into a cry for help. Isn't that how it feels sometimes in life? When we start with hope, with belief, but the moment things get tough, we feel like we're drowning. The other disciples still sat in the boat, stunned. They didn't move. They didn't speak. They couldn't believe what was happening in front of them. One moment Peter was walking on water, and the next he was going under. The question now was, what would Jesus do? The sea was still raging. The sky was still dark. The boat was far from shore. Everything felt uncertain. But in the middle of all that chaos, something powerful was about to happen. Something that would reveal not only the strength of Jesus, but the heart of Peter and the true meaning of faith. This story isn't over. The most important moment is still to come. Stay with me, because what happens next will leave you breathless. As Peter struggled to stay above the crashing waves, everything he believed was put to the test. The cold water rushed around him, pulling him down, and for a brief second, he must have thought it was over. All the confidence he had when he stepped out of the boat was gone. What remained now was fear and panic. But even as he sank, his heart still held on to one thing: Jesus. In the middle of the storm, in the middle of his failure, he still cried out, "Lord, save me!" That cry wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And sometimes, that's all faith needs to be. Back in the boat, the disciples looked on, caught between awe and fear. Each of them had their own thoughts racing through their minds. Why didn't they step out too? What if it had been them? Maybe they were safer staying inside, clinging to what little comfort the boat offered. But was safety really faith? Was staying back really trust? The storm outside might have been loud, but the storm inside their hearts was louder. And then there's Peter. This wasn't just a moment of drowning, it was a moment of breaking. He had been bold, brave, but now he was exposed. And that's the deeper conflict, when our courage is shaken and our faith is tested, not in the miracle, but in the moment we fall short. Jesus hadn't moved. He was still there, standing firm on the waves. But would he reach out? Would he let Peter sink further? Or was this a lesson Peter had to learn the hard way? The waves kept rising. The boat rocked violently. The tension hung in the air like thunder waiting to break. And in that pause, everything was still uncertain. Peter's cry echoed across the waves, raw and desperate. "Lord, save me!" The wind shrieked louder as if trying to drown out his voice, and the sea pulled at his legs like it wanted to take him under for good. His hands flailed through the churning water, reaching for something, anything that could keep him from sinking. The fear was written all over his face, not just of the storm, but of failing, of not having enough faith. He had believed, but was it enough? The disciples, still clinging to the sides of the boat, were frozen. Not one of them dared to speak. All eyes were fixed on the space between Peter and Jesus. Would Jesus turn away? Would he let Peter fall completely? Their hearts pounded. The storm wasn't slowing down. If anything, it seemed to grow worse by the second. The waves towered higher, the rain pelted harder, and thunder rolled above them, shaking the sky. Jesus stood just a few steps away, calm, steady, eyes locked on Peter, but he hadn't moved yet. Why was he waiting? Why wasn't he reaching out? Each second felt like a lifetime. Peter's body sank lower, the water rising to his chest. His voice broke again. "Lord!" This was the breaking point, the climax of fear and faith colliding. One man against the storm, one moment standing between rescue and ruin. Would Jesus catch him? Would Peter be swallowed by doubt? Or was something far greater unfolding beneath the surface? Something the disciples couldn't yet understand. The sea raged on, time slowed, everything hung in a fragile balance. And then, just as Peter's head dipped below the waterline, something happened. But that moment we'll come back to, because what's about to unfold will change everything. Just as Peter's head dipped below the water, right at the edge of sinking completely, a hand shot through the storm, strong, steady, unshaken. Jesus grabbed Peter's arm and pulled him up with ease, as if the raging sea had no power over him at all. But he didn't smile. His voice was gentle but serious. "You of little faith, why did you doubt?" That question wasn't shouted. It wasn't meant to shame. It was real, honest, piercing. And it hung in the air heavier than the thunder itself. Peter gasped for breath, heart pounding not just from nearly drowning, but from realizing how close he had come to letting fear win. Jesus and Peter stood there, still on the water, still surrounded by waves and wind. But now something felt different. The other disciples had seen it all. The miracle, the failure, the rescue. Their minds were racing, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. And then, out of nowhere, lightning split the sky, followed by the loudest crack of thunder yet. The sea shook beneath them, and a massive wave rose behind them like a wall. The storm wasn't done. But this time, the danger wasn't just physical. Something deeper was at play. Suddenly, the boat groaned loudly. The wood creaked under pressure, and one of the disciples shouted, "We're taking in water!" Panic broke out. They began bailing with their hands, shouting over the wind. Peter looked back at the boat, then at Jesus. The sea wasn't just testing one man anymore. It was testing them all. This wasn't just about one person's faith. Now the whole group faced a choice: fear the storm or trust the one who walks above it. And then came the twist no one expected. As the boat rocked violently, one of the disciples, the quietest one, the most doubtful, suddenly stood up and stepped toward the edge. Eyes wide, lips trembling, he looked out toward Jesus, still holding Peter. The storm reflected in his eyes, but something else stirred there too. Longing. He hadn't said a word the whole time, but now he looked like he was about to do something bold, maybe even reckless. The others shouted, "Stay in the boat!" But he didn't move. He just stared at Jesus, at the impossible scene before him. And then he lifted one foot. What happens next might change everything. The disciple's foot hovered above the edge of the boat. The sea roared beneath him, but his eyes never left Jesus. The others called out in panic, some trying to hold him back, others frozen in place. But it was too late. He stepped out, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, he didn't sink. The storm was still wild, the boat still rocked, but there he was, standing on water. No one expected it, not even Peter. This quiet, uncertain follower was doing what they all feared to try. But then, just as quickly as he rose, doubt flickered across his face. His balance wavered. His lips trembled. He looked down. And like Peter, he began to sink. Faster this time. The waves pulled harder. He gasped, his arms flailing. But Jesus was already there. Without hesitation, Jesus reached for him too. Two hands now, held tight by the one who never sank. Jesus looked at both of them. Peter, bold but shaken, and the other, timid but brave enough to try. And with a voice steady and full of authority, he said, "Why do you doubt?" Then came the moment no one expected. As Jesus helped them both back into the boat, the instant his feet touched the deck, everything changed. The wind stopped. The sea went calm. Not just quieter, not a slow fade. It stopped, like someone had turned off the storm with a single command. The waves fell still, the clouds cleared, the silence was overwhelming. The disciples collapsed to their knees, wide-eyed, breathless, hearts pounding. Some cried, some whispered. One voice broke through the quiet. "Truly, you are the Son of God." It was over. The danger passed, the lesson learned, or so they thought. As the boat drifted quietly across the now glass-like, staring at his own hands, the ones that had reached, doubted, and been saved. He turned to Jesus, ready to speak, but before he could, Jesus looked at him and said, "You stepped out, you sank, but I never let go." And just when everyone thought they understood what had happened, a figure appeared on the distant shore. watching, waiting, a quiet presence that no one had noticed before. Not part of the storm, but clearly connected to what had just unfolded. The storm may have ended on the sea, but something was beginning on the land. As the boat gently reached the shore, the disciples stepped onto the land in complete silence. The night sky, once filled with storm clouds, now stretched above them, calm and clear. The waves that had once threatened to drown them now kissed the sand softly. But none of them spoke, not because there was nothing to say, but because what had happened was beyond words. Each man carried a different weight in his heart: fear, awe, gratitude, and a new understanding of faith. Peter stayed back for a moment, walking slowly behind the others. His mind was still replaying everything. The water under his feet, the fear in his chest, the strong hand pulling him back. He had failed, yes, but Jesus hadn't let him fall. And that truth stayed with him, louder than the sound of any wave. Faith wasn't about walking perfectly. It was about trusting the one who never leaves you, even when you start to sink. The other disciple, the one who also stepped out, walked beside him now, quiet but not afraid. They exchanged a glance, a silent agreement that something inside them had changed. The fear that once held them back had given way to a deeper kind of trust. They had seen the power of Jesus not only in his ability to walk on water, but in his willingness to lift them up when they couldn't stand on their own. As they rejoined the group, Jesus stood in the center, looking at each of them, not with judgment, but with kindness. The disciples, one by one, began to realize that the storm had not come to destroy them. It had come to reveal something. Their weakness, yes, but also his strength. Their fear, but also his faithfulness. This wasn't just a story about a miracle. It was a lesson about what faith really means. In our lives, the storms may not come with waves and wind, but they come through doubt, loss, anxiety, and fear. We all have moments when we feel like we're sinking, but the story of Jesus walking on water reminds us that no matter how deep the water, we are never alone. His hand is always reaching. Our part is just to cry out and believe he'll catch us. And with that, they walked away from the sea, not the same men who had stepped into the boat, but men who had seen the power of faith face to face. And maybe, just maybe, you and I can do the same.